2023. I think we're going to start with approval of our minutes. So do we have any changes? I know they went out and we already kind of talked about those, but are there any further changes?
Nope.
Not for me.
Thank you everyone for that. So then we also had, sorry, I need to pull up the agenda. My apologies.
Does that mean the minutes are approved?
Oh,
Yes, indeed.
yeah. Sorry. Yes. The minutes
Thank
are
you.
approved as submitted. Thank you, Deborah. Apologies. Sorry, y'all. I'm just getting the agenda pulled up. Okay, so the first item, I apologize, is our review of the first public hearing on the charter review, which we had on the 8th. Does anybody have any ideas about kind of how we want to go through this review for today's meeting, since we were all present in that meeting? Do we want to just kind of go through the feedback we got on each item, or how do we want to approach that?
That would work fine, I guess.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead then and start with the first item that we had, which was the item that I presented. That was the gender inclusive language was the feedback that we had received, is that we should frame it as gender inclusive language rather than non-binary or gender neutral language. So if we can go ahead and make that change, I think that made sense as feedback that, or actually, sorry, that was feedback that we received in the Citizens Committee. My apologies. But so that was the first item that we did go through. In general, there was not much feedback from the public hearing. There was some feedback from the Engage Aurora comments that folks weren't sure kind of whether this was something we needed to do. It seemed either not relevant to them or just not necessary, but in general, the comments on Engage Aurora were positive. So those are the general comments that we received on that item. Does anybody else want to add anything else regarding the comments that we received?
We don't have anything to add on top of that.
All right, seeing no further comments or additions, Councilmember Marcano, do you want to kind of summarize the feedback that we got on your items?
Yeah, so the first one we had was election timing. Julie Marie brought up interest.
Sorry, we're talking about the public hearing first, and then we'll go through and talk about the Citizens Charter Review Committee.
Yeah, I know
I got confused too.
Yes, my bad. My recollection is we had one person testify in person. They were in support of that change. And then I recall most of the commentary that we received online being favorable, although I don't have that pulled up in front of me.
Yeah, so I think there was one question about the cost, which was also addressed
Yes.
in the discussion that we had. which was around the fact that it will increase costs overall per election, but that the number of voters, it doesn't cost more per voter. It's just that we would have more voters. And so having more voters would cost more, to have more voter service and polling centers to provide services to them. So I
Which
think
we
that was
actually
the
just
only,
touched on that point yesterday during study session where we're having one VSPC for our municipals
well, one on city-owned property.
on city-owned
Yes,
property, anywho, but yes.
I do want to make sure that we check in about how many total voter service and polling centers we have, because as noted during the general elections, we have quite a few. So we want to make sure that we're not contributing to the underperforming of our odd year elections by not having enough voter service and polling centers for voters. That, of course, does not require a charter change. That's really a conversation that we can have as a council and with the county clerk and the county clerks and the city clerk around that issue. But that was the main question, was around cost. So, and then there was one person who kind of, for all the changes, felt that we just should leave the charter alone, and they didn't support changing the charter in any manner. So I think that's all of my recollection as far as feedback on that item. Councilmember Medina and Councilmember Lawson, do you all have anything else to add from the discussion that we had in the public hearing?
None on that item, Councilmember Coombs.
Not at this time, thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Councilmember Marcano, do you want to move on to your next item from the public hearing?
Yeah, so the next one was the ballot question regarding partisan elections and vacancy committees. So I just want to reiterate that since then, I've gone ahead and bifurcated that into two separate questions, so that we can kind of keep those issues separate. So my recollection was that the in-person individual that we had was supportive. And there was kind of more mixed feedback there. Some folks wanted that transparency. Other folks thought that it would lean into some of the partisan issues that we've seen locally and nationally. But yeah, I think that's my recollection of the sentiment that came from that. And I know we had someone ask about special districts and I think maybe metro districts on top of that, but that it would not apply to those races. That would have to be done by the state legislature.
Yep, that is my recollection of everything that was discussed on that item. Does anybody else have anything they want to add there?
Nothing for me on that one.
Okay.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you, Councilmember Medina and Councilmember Lawson. So Councilmember Marcano, so you separated them. Did you want to talk separately about the vacancy committee since you were focused on the partisan election, or does that cover both for you?
That did, well, actually, no, it didn't really cover both. Yeah, with regards to the vacancy committee, I know that Councilmember Lawson and some other folks expressed concerns around just making more of a convoluted process if we assume partisan positions, and then having a slightly different process for folks who are unaffiliated. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to separate that out from the partisan question. So I think the more I think about it, the more I lean towards it's just a simpler process to just have the nominators for any of our for any candidates, period. Basically be the vacancy committee for those candidates in the event of a vacancy. So that's the direction that I'm hoping folks will go in. But yeah, so those are now split into two different proposals, and I find myself supporting I think the simpler, just utilizing the nominators approach. So, and well, I won't get into the feedback that we got from the ad hoc committee just yet.
Right, we will go ahead and cover that in the next item, but I did want to add that a question that I had wondered about that had some discussion was whether or not we only count the nominators that were, I mean, I guess we can talk about this with the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee, but basically how many petition signatures get included. And you're right, that did get discussed by the Citizens Charter Review Committee. So maybe we can leave that piece for that part of the discussion. Does anybody else have any further comments about the Charter Review Committee in relation to, or sorry, the public hearing in relation to this item? I think it didn't get discussed that much because it was two items together when folks were originally reading. So I think we'll probably get more feedback on that once people have seen it as two separate items. So, all right. Well, thank you, Councilmember Marcano, for kind of sharing the feedback on your items. Councilmember Lawson, do you want to discuss the full-time council members proposal and the public hearing?
Sure. So I guess to me, my recollection of this, I don't have all the comments up, was that it was kind of a mixed, with people not saying that we shouldn't do it because, this is kind of, we are doing this as public servants and, it shouldn't be changed in the charter. And then there was others that says that we are a full-time council. I think the individual, our constituent that was there stated that she did support it. So it was kind of a mixed bag. I think what some of the questions that were asked were basically the amount or how much we would, the salary would be. So that was something, I guess, that was in the Engage Aurora packet, but it wasn't actually in the packet that we had. So that was kind of something that I wish was in that packet. I did get some updated salaries from our HR, so I'm hoping to put that into the packet for review for not only the commission, but also for this upcoming hearing. So that kind of gives us kind of some more updated numbers and updated figures according to what our salaries are in Aurora, and then from a broader range of cities our size, our population, population growth in the future. So I haven't looked at it yet, Councilmember Coombs and Councilmember Marcano, Medina, but I do have some updated information that I will be submitting for the packets. Also, I'm trying to look at a provision and work with our city attorney's office. This is something that you brought up, Councilmember Coombs, that I'm glad that you, and also a constituent as well, is how will we determine what's full-time? If we're not going to have a moonlighting provision, then, we could have people on council getting two incomes and not really doing the work of what a full-time council member would be doing. So I think I'm looking at working with our city attorney's office and trying to get some information before our next hearing, and also for the commission to determine, should there be so many council meetings that a person should attend, or what does that look like and the legalities of that. So I think that that's going to have to be something that I'm going to have to incorporate in this as we're moving forward with this proposal. So that's what I've recollected so far from the hearing, and additional information I wanted to provide to the committee today.
Yep, that sounds correct to me. Councilmember Medina, do you have anything to add?
Nope, sounds great.
Okay, excellent. And I saw a thumbs up from Councilmember Marcano. So I think we're good to go on that one. The other items that we did discuss were additional changes that may be recommended by members of the public, either through the hearing or through the Engage Aurora platform. The individual who was present at the hearing did not have additional comments or additional suggestions. However, there were a number of items suggested on Engage Aurora. One of the suggestions was with respect to felons running for public office, so people having been convicted of felonies. And so we know that there was a charter vote on this in our last election, this last year, and the citizens did vote not to permit that. However, council still may not enforce a charter provision preventing individuals who have been previously convicted of a felony from running for office unless their conviction is tied to the set of crimes that are excluded by the state constitution. And so the city is operating in accord with the state constitution in terms of which felonies may be taken under consideration for not permitting individuals to run for office. So we are not. So it does not seem to me that we should put that to yet another vote right now, since that already did not pass, and yet we still may not enforce it as written. So the other items listed were eliminating the mayor's ability to create a tie. That I think is just, and there wasn't much elaboration from whomever proposed that, but that was listed as a suggestion. Reviewing the charter after every census and establishing a citizen advisory committee for reviewing the charter. That could be made as a charter provision, but it also could be made as an ordinance. So we could put that in city code to create that committee and have them be expected to conduct that review after every census. I did attempt to propose a regular charter committee that was not ad hoc, and that did not have the support of the members that were on this committee last year. So right now for this round, we are doing an ad hoc committee, and we can revisit that, but we don't have to do that within the charter. City Attorney Brotzman, do you have any comment on whether or not there's any reason to put it in the charter versus in the doing that by ordinance if we decided we wanted to do that?
And in this case, either method works. Either method works. You could do it by ordinance. With the votes the way they are, if you don't have enough to do the ordinance, you probably don't have enough to do the ballot question.
Right, but we can do that. There's
yes,
not
no, that's an option. That's an option. If it's in the charter, it's harder to ignore in the future.
Okay. And then I did request as well a presentation because I have heard that there will be an effort to get through petitioning onto the ballot, that there's an interest in changing from a city manager, council manager form of government to a strong mayor form of government. So although that has not been proposed through this committee by any council members, since there is a likelihood that that will be brought forward, I requested that we have a presentation at the next public hearing on that item. And I did receive information from the city attorney's office that there will be an individual, an outside attorney that will be present to give a presentation at the next public hearing on the changing from a council manager to a strong mayor form of government.
And Chair Coombs,
yes.
Joining us today is Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson is the former general counsel for CML, and he is also currently representing a number of cities, and as well as representing Broomfield in their charter review process. So Jeff is here, and he was going to give you just a thumbnail of what he was going to present. Jeff?
Excellent, thank you. Jeff, you have the floor if you're ready to go.
Adrian, I wonder if there's an issue with his connection to us, to the WebEx.
Yep. Oh wait, I was going to say it looks like he dropped off, but he just changed positions. Oh, there we go. There he is. Jeff, you have the floor. But we cannot hear you. So I don't know if you're muted or if it's just an audio issue. It looks like you're muted.
At the bottom of your screen, there's a button to unmute.
I think he unmuted, so I think we're good to go. Oh, we still can't hear you.
Jeff, you might be using
Mr.
the wrong
Mr. Wilson.
device.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Wilson. This is Adrian. So next to that mute button there at the bottom, if you pull that little arrow down, you can pick what your microphone is. Make sure that
Does that work?
So we can hear you now.
Yes, we can
There you
hear
go,
you
Jeff.
now, so go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, great. What I was instructed to do was, rather than do a soliloquy on strong mayor form of government, as I understood the request, was that I describe the process for getting there. You know, how essentially it's a huge charter amendment, and it's either through referral by the city council or by initiative. And so I was planning on going through both of those processes. The Constitution reserves to the council the power to refer charter amendments, and the code itself has detailed provisions about the initiation of those amendments by the public. And so I was planning on going through both of those, as well as emphasizing that this is fundamentally different from, you know, an initiative for a charter amendment to change the number of days for filling a vacancy, for example. This is a fundamental change of government. It's a major drafting issue. Very important to get it right. Often followed at, Colorado Springs provides a good exemplar. If the voters approve the change of government, you're not done yet. There's a serious going through of the city's ordinances that is then required to complete the job. So that was briefly the scope of what I was going to do at the public hearing. And I appreciate this opportunity, because if what you would like is something else, this is a good chance for me to hear that.
So I think my question would be, I know there's a serious going through of all of the ordinances, but maybe some kind of summary of how that would change the operations of government, what kind of powers a strong mayor has in that system over a city manager form of government, and the powers that are dedicated to the manager, and any other significant changes, right? For example, department directors are hired through kind of more of a typical hiring process and appointed by the city manager under our current process. So I think how that would impact kind of hiring and staffing would be an issue that I would want to have a better understanding of and have that be shared with the public. Are there any other items that other members would like to have discussed?
Yes, Councilmember Coombs. I just have one.
Yeah, Councilmember Lawson.
I'm sorry, I have one question for Jeff. Jeff, was that the one for Colorado Springs? Just curious, just right now, and then I have what I maybe want to look into. Was that an initiative that was done by a group to change it to like what's being proposed here, possibly in Aurora? It was an initiative.
Yes.
Okay.
Significantly, there was a lot of good interaction between the city and the proponents of the initiative.
Okay.
So, which is, I think it has a lot to recommend it. You have something of this complexity.
Okay. What I would like to look into is because I'm from Colorado Springs, but my parents live there, but I remember when this came up. I guess what I'm looking at is what were the challenges? And I know Councilmember Coombs is talking about that, but I want to know, like, what was the challenges that the city had in incorporating this, because they were a city form of manager government, and then they had to just revamp everything. And what are some of the some of the current issues from that charter change. I know things are kind of running smoothly a little bit, but just kind of some of those challenges I would like to look at from that perspective, just in general, from, you know, because they had to change from one form all of a sudden, and then it just automatically changed. And that had a lot of impact on services. It had a lot of impact on how the city was managed, just getting through that transition. And how long did it take them to get there, I guess, to more of a more smoother transition, which they're at now, I guess.
I'm
Kind of a
scheduled.
convoluted question, but
Oh, that's okay. No, I'm due to have lunch with Winetta Massey, the city attorney for
Okay.
Colorado Springs,
okay.
to talk about a lot of this stuff. And I just made some notes, and I'll talk to her about all of that.
Yeah, because I think when you do this, you know, there's going to be probably, depending on who the mayor is, they could bring in their own individuals, and then that could change some different perspectives on different agenda items, how services are done, how just the whole, you know, perspective of the city government could be compared to what
Okay.
it's currently now. So just kind of interested in that.
I'll add some more substance along with the process.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I'm hearing. Happy to
Yes,
do it.
thank you so much. That's super
Mhm.
helpful. And thank you, Councilmember Lawson, for kind of drawing out some of that based on your familiarity with Colorado Springs. Any other comments from other members? Any other requests for this presentation?
Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Jeff, for joining us. So I'm curious to know what I guess the menu of options, if you will, for what a strong mayor form of government looks like across the country. So maybe you can pick a handful of cities that might have substantial differences in terms of the scope and powers of a strong mayor. And of course, I always want to juxtapose that against the city council manager form of government. Because, you know, well, I won't get into my opinion about this right now. That's not what you're here for. But yeah, that's in addition to what my colleagues have already laid out. That's what I'd like to explore.
Let me make sure I understand that, council member.
Sure.
You want to know what gradations in the power of strong mayors in the
Yes.
strong mayor form across the country?
Yeah, because I know in some cities they're able to appoint, for example, department directors. In other cities they are not. That's still done through, I guess a different maybe HR process. I'm not really sure. To be frank, I'm really only familiar with the council manager form of government. So, yeah, or at least our specific council manager form of government. And I just know of strong mayor systems from some of the issues that we see coming from Denver. And Houston, which I formerly lived in as well. So,
if I could suggest, I'd be happy to look into that. But I'm a municipal attorney. I'm not a comparative government scholar. So,
gotcha.
I'm happy to look. But you might ask your own staff to see if they can come up with anything like that as well.
All right.
I can check with ICMA and look at some other groups like that. But certainly, I've done a bunch of research already, and I found a lot of information distinguishing the council manager form of government from the strong mayor form. That kind of information is fairly easy to get.
Yeah.
The gradation that you're looking for, I just haven't looked yet, so I can't tell you what it lifts out to be, but happy to look.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I do wonder to some extent if that's part of the subsequent review that we would do should this pass. But I suppose it's beneficial for the residents to have an understanding of that this could look a number of different ways. There's not just one way it may look, but we can certainly ask for staff to hold some things so that it's not all falling on you to get that kind of information.
In recent years has been towards the council manager form, as I'm sure all of you know. And we're fortunate in Colorado to have Colorado Springs, a major city like Aurora that has recently gone through this transition. Yes, the cities are different, and yes, there are obviously different local variations, but it's a fairly current and very comprehensive process that we can look at.
Absolutely. So I think that definitely will be helpful. and maybe we'll ask staff to pull together some information about different types, so that you don't have to incorporate that into your presentation. Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions or comments?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I think that should be fairly clear direction. I think what I was looking for kind of falls under what the other members requested. Do you have any other questions for us or things that you're looking for from us?
No, thank you. This has been extremely helpful to me, and I look forward to the 11th. How
Excellent.
much time am I going
Thank you.
By the way, how much time am I going to have on the 11th? Do you know? Just to give me
I don't think we had decided that. How much time do you think you need?
20 minutes, 15,
Okay.
half an hour, maybe. I'm
Half
going
an
to walk
hour
through
and
your,
then-
I'm going to walk through your initiative process. I'm going to talk about referral. I'm going to talk about the importance of doing a very thorough job. I'm going to talk about how you're not done when you get done amending the charter. You have a bunch of code amendments to do. And I'll include some stuff generally describing what strong mayor form of government means, especially with respect to personnel management.
Councilman
Okay.
Coombs, I think it's like whatever time, 30 minutes. I mean, this is a really important topic because it could really change the whole structure of the city. So whatever time you need, I'm
Okay.
it's with.
You don't want to tell a lawyer whatever time he needs. Come on.
So we'll say 30 minutes.
Right,
If
30.
it goes a little bit longer, we'll,
Okay.
give some grace. We don't have our agendas structured such that we cut you off right at the
Okay. All right.
time
Great.
limit or anything. So we'll plan for 30 minutes, but if there's a need for more time, then that'll be okay.
And I'll try and leave time for questions within that 30 minutes. So,
Okay.
okay.
Excellent.
Thank
That
you all
sounds
very much.
great. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And look forward
course.
to the presentation on the 11th.
Yeah.
Okay, so then our next item is on the Citizens Ad Hoc Charter Review Committee first meeting. So we did have a conversation with them about all items except for, all of the items that council has proposed. So we didn't talk through the additional feedback, additional proposals from Engage Aurora, and we did not have the opportunity to discuss the full-time council. I know that they are inviting Councilmember Lawson to do a deep dive on that item at their very next meeting. We did an initial summary discussion of mine and Councilmember Marcano's items. So we'll go through those quickly because there will be a deep dive meeting for each set of items. So they're doing a whole meeting on, we talked a lot about rules and process because they had quite a few questions about rules and process. And so the process that they have settled on is that they will have each of our proposals come for a full meeting where they have the ability to discuss in further detail now that they have the kind of initial summary available to them. And then they're going to provide before our study session at the beginning of June a report to this committee. We will likely need to do an extra meeting at the end of May or that first week of June before this goes on to study session to kind of review their discussion and prepare our report to the full council for study session, because they did ask to have until the end of May because they do want to really do a deep dive on each item. But they will provide us with a report. We did have a question from one of the members about whether they can bifurcate kind of their recommendations on each item to, do they recommend implementing the item? Like, would they personally support that item? And do they recommend sending it to the voters to get the voters' opinion? So they're separating that out into both because I think that's a relevant question, right? You may not personally think something's a good idea, but you do think that folks have the right to give their input and their voice. So that's going to be the structure of the report, is kind of a summary of their discussion on each item, and then does each member support sending it to the ballot? and do they believe that it should be implemented as well. And then we gave a general overview of the process. So, right, they will give us a report. We will then provide their report and our report to the full council at a study session. Then any items that are going to be referred to the ballot will be voted on at a first and second reading by council prior to then the city clerk's process to get those items on the ballot. So that was the summary that we went through of the process itself. And then there was really robust and thoughtful discussion already on the items. As I mentioned, on the gender language conversation, they did recommend changing the language to, or actually I think it was Clerk Rodriguez mentioned that they have found language that's gender inclusive rather than gender neutral or non-binary. And that was recommended by a member of the committee as they thought being more understandable rather than saying non-binary in the language of what goes on the ballot. That was really the main discussion. So that, again, there wasn't extended discussion on that item. But I will go ahead and pass it on to Councilmember Marcano to talk about his items and the discussion that those generated.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. So we started off with election timing. So the commentary that we received, so Julie Marie wanted us to look into the Castle Rock and Parker School Board turnout. And when they shifted from 2 even years from odd years. I thought that was a really interesting point. So I hadn't checked out, I guess, I don't know if they have their own school districts or if it's a larger one that maybe they both share. But anywho, I will check into that because I am curious to know how that's impacted turnout for those races, or rather what the turnout for those races was and remains. Mike Soletti was concerned about lowering turnout for school board races and for Tabor questions. And I thought that was an interesting point as well. Although I think you mentioned that there's movement at the state legislature to switch school board races to even years for the same reason we're trying to do this for municipal races in order to increase turnout. So that might be addressed through that fashion. The next item that we were discussing was just moving our races to partisan races. Received some combination of feedback from folks that they're concerned that parties would take precedence over issues. Julie Marie specifically pointed out that unaffiliateds are a majority in Colorado. Let's see here. Also made a comment that core city issues aren't necessarily partisan. Let me see what else. And then we had Mike Soletti mention that he didn't think that council wanted to be branded in the same light as our state and federal parties. Katrina Zarelli mentioned that more information is never a bad thing and believes that we get less information from being nonpartisan, or at least, our elections being nonpartisan. And that Becky Hogan said that she believes that the municipals should remain nonpartisan and that conflict will continue regardless. When we moved to the vacancy committee conversations, I kind of gave the overview like I did a bit ago with a bifurcated process. And folks seemed more interested in the unaffiliated path, right? Or not the unaffiliated path, the nonpartisan vacancy committee path, if that makes sense. Former Mayor Ed Tower, was particularly interested in that petition model. I think his comment was that he said it was unique and he wasn't sure if anyone had tried anything like that for vacancies yet. I did bring up that that's pulled from the state for anyone who might serve in a legislative or executive position legislative position who then has a vacancy. but is not affiliated with any of the major parties in the state. So it's the same process. Let's see here. Dennis Lyons wanted to ensure that it's clear that we must be a resident of the city in order to serve on a vacancy, which I believe it is clear in the latest language that we have. And then he mentioned that he'd rather leave a position vacant if council can't find someone that they agree with, which would leave, potentially a ward without representation. Julie Marie asked how frequently this happens, and I believe Katie was able to chime in that we've only had 3 vacancies in the past 20 years. So thankfully it is an infrequent circumstance. Katrina Sorelli supported utilizing nominators as folks to comprise a vacancy committee. Jan Wilson commented that she was upset about what happened with former Councilmember Johnston's position and wants the values to remain with those positions. And Mike Saletti also wanted clarification about folks who would apply for a vacancy committee. To fill that vacancy, that they would have to reside in their ward if it was a ward specific position, which we did confirm that was the intent behind the process that's being proposed. And those are the notes that I had from my items.
And then again, as I mentioned, there was a question about whether or not it's just the 50 signatures that were counted as valid for getting a person on the ballot for a ward, or 100 for mayor and at large. And I believe that we had previously had clarification that it would be all of the petition signers who remain Aurora residents and submitted a valid signature. So we would actually be looking through more individuals, because really nobody submits just the exact number that they need, because then you might not get enough signatures in case some were invalid. And so it would be everyone, and that would help cut down as well on any issue that might arise from people moving during the time since they signed the petition and when the vacancy may occur. So that was just another piece of information, that it would actually be more than just 50 for a ward and 100 for at-large that would at least be under consideration.
Thank you for bringing that back up, Councilmember Coombs, and I believe it was actually former Mayor Tower who had inquired about that as well. And yes, you're correct. My preference would be to go with all valid signatories for those reasons.
Yeah. Any questions or comments on those items?
At this time.
All right, thank you. And then, yeah, we did not discuss the full-time council. That will be discussed at their next upcoming meeting. They are going to have a pretty aggressive meeting schedule to be able to get everything in by the end of May. And they are inviting the council members that brought forward the item. They did also request that we try to have someone who may be opposed to an item to present their perspective as well, so that they're getting both perspectives. And so I do think that it would be up to this committee to help find those folks in the event of, I think, at least 2 out of 3 of Councilmember Marcano's proposals. I think Councilmember Lawson, that you did not support those. I don't know if you want to be the person that comes to present that opposing view, or if you would like us to request from one of the other council members that was on the committee last year that also held that same position to instead attend the meeting as kind of the opposing view.
Well, I think it might be good to maybe have either Councilmember Bergen or them also, instead of, because you've heard my perspectives on these. So I think you've heard them numerous times. So it might be good to get another person who might have a different thought process than I do. So I don't think
Okay.
I've already given you mine multiple times. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then we can also reach out to folks on the committee from last year who were in opposition to your item as well, because I know
Right.
that did not have unanimous support.
Right, both were, so, against it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so my item didn't come forward last year. It came forward only this year. I don't believe there's considerable opposition, but I will ask our colleagues to see if any of them are opposed and would want to come give that perspective. If not, I suppose we can kind of just provide the written comments that were given on Engage Aurora that were in opposition. So yeah, I will find out if we have opposition to that item. I have, other than a few Engage Aurora comments, I have not heard much opposition, but I'll look into that. And so we can check in with Deborah and Linda to make sure that we have an opponent to present in addition to the proponents at each of those meetings.
okay, so Councilmember Coombs, just a procedural. So I got a couple dates from Linda on the committee when they want me to present. So it looks like all of us won't be at the same meeting. So these people in opposition, we just need to confirm if they can attend those meetings that I'm gonna be presenting my item. Councilmember Marcano's items. Is that how this is working? Just
Yes,
procedurally?
exactly. So they wouldn't have to attend every meeting. They would just
Okay.
attend the meetings for the specific items that they are willing to give that opposition perspective on. So any other questions about the procedure on that or what we need to do to make those happen? Okay, well, we thank everyone for being willing to attend those additional items with our citizen committee. And of course, we thank the citizen committee as well for providing their perspective and their really good questions. I do think we got some really good discussion just even from that initial kind of conversation that we had. And also thank you to the council members for selecting folks that, you know, had really thoughtful approaches to the charter. So I think that's it for that item. Any further comments on that? Okay. All right. I seem to be missing my agenda now that I have pulled up. So I think that's our last item other than confirming our next meeting.
Actually, there's a miscellaneous item,
Oh.
I think, that needs to be brought up that was sent to us as an addition, Councilmember Coombs.
Okay.
Needs to, for a charter amendment. I think Angela Garcia is on here. I don't know who's going to be presenting.
Okay. So miscellaneous items for consideration.
And we got an email on this item. So
do we know, Dan, who is here to present on this item?
Hi, this is Deborah, Councilmember Coombs. I don't see her on there, and I did not extend an invitation. I just wanted to suggest or ask if you wanted this to be on there so you could see what was coming, and then we could schedule an actual presentation, and to get your approval to put it on the agenda for the May 2nd meeting.
Okay. I am sorry, I did not see that item this morning. I was working up until the meeting today. Yes, why don't we go ahead and plan to have that at our May 2nd meeting. And then if we can make sure that it's also available to the Citizens Committee as well to review. So yes, let's add that to the agenda for the next meeting,
For May
which
2nd.
is
Okay.
May 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so then I think that brings us to our final item, which is the next meeting, which will be May 2nd. And again, at 2 p.m. Does that work with everybody's schedule?
Works for me.
works for me too.
Okay, Excellent. So we will have that as our next meeting. And I will follow up with Deborah and Linda about making sure we get everything scheduled that we need to get scheduled for both the Citizens Committee and for this committee in terms of presenters and other information.
And then Councilmember Coombs, can I just ask one more additional question about our May 2nd meeting? We're going to be
Yes.
having these additional meetings. So are we going to kind of do what we did today, kind of with the comments and what came out of from the commission? Is that how we're going to be doing that? Is that going to be an agenda item? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I think it should be, just in case we have any additional information we want to provide them before they make their recommendations.
Okay.
So if there's anything that kind of came up in their discussion, your presentation and the opposition discussion, that we bring back to them. And I think that will be in general the substance of our remaining meetings, other than this one that's coming forward on the 2nd. I don't think we have other additional items being brought forward. And I think probably I should reach out to our colleagues and convey that May 2nd will be kind of the cutoff for new items, both for the ability for our process as well as the Citizens Committee to review, because we can't just kind of keep adding them and not have time to review them. So I think we can say May 2nd is the last chance for any new items to come forward to this committee and to go through kind of all of the process.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So
yeah, thank you for asking. I think that will be good. And then again, we will have to schedule an extra meeting before the study session after the conclusion of the Citizens Committee process. Any other questions before we conclude? All right. Well, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.